Welcome to My Favorite CX, a podcast that celebrates exceptional customer experiences. To listen to today's, please choose from one of the following options.
Welcome to My Favorite Customer Experience. I'm Chris from Holt CX Consultancy over here in the UK, and I'm joined today by Laura Bassett from Techfluency. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to be here.
Well, Laura, obviously we previously worked together at Nice CXone a couple of years back, and you had an amazing title there. Not the official title, I don't think, but Chief Storyteller, which is quite an awesome thing to be known for.
Yeah, that was, that one came to me from someone else. And I think it truly stemmed from helping people understand what could happen in customer experience, from giving them true stories of what had been done and why it mattered to other customers.
And I think that's a massive thing, having come from the technology sector, of like relaying the features into actual business value and real value to people. That's something that we, coming from a pre-sales background, we sometimes forget or struggle with.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And there's definitely an art to understanding the technology, but not having that be the first thing that drives the conversation, right? That first thing that drives the conversation is, why does it matter? Right. And that's where it's definitely about the experience that is delivered, but what does that really do to benefit the company that's focusing on customer experience and help them understand the value of delivering the top-notch CX.
And after your time at Nice, you took a sideways step, or a completely different step even, and went into setting up your own fractional CMO practice towards the end of 2024. So what was that like, moving from the corporate world into doing your own thing?
It's great. Honestly, it gives me the ability to focus directly on solving the problems for the different organizations without getting caught up in what I might call the day-to-day or the sidebars that in many cases, and no offense to corporate America, but that this is what happens, right? Or corporate world. But it really enables the diligence and focus to get the strategy put in place and the execution plan put in place without all the different distractors that come with the full-time aspect. And so, when done right, I've been able to work for a company as a fractional CMO for 10 hours a week, but when done right, they feel like you're there full time. But there's not all the wasted expense sitting in the extra meetings or, the non-productive. Every meeting is a productive conversation.
So you get in there, understand the brief, get the job done, get out before you're brought into the various different briefings through the day on things that actually don't necessarily drive what you do.
That don't add the value to what you're trying to deliver for the business. You are 100% focused on the results and the activities to get to those results. And that's what then I would do as I lead a team, where there are probably a mix of full-time employees for that company or contractors or agencies, whatever might be the right mix for them. But, I'll go in and we'll have a working session, a couple of stand-up meetings, make sure everybody's on track, everybody knows what they're doing, and we'll move it forward, right? And it's all about, what are the objectives that we're trying to achieve in this quarter's plan.
And I guess marketing has for a long time been very closely aligned with customer experience, and ideally they should be very intertwined. And obviously with your experience in customer experience as well, what are you seeing that's exciting you at the moment in that area?
I'm actually really glad that you brought in that tie-in. There is such a connection between marketing and customer experience, because really, what are we doing in marketing? We're trying to gain new customers. And how do we gain new customers? By selling them on the fact that we deliver a great product and a great customer experience, and we deliver them value, right? and in some form that they're looking for to do business with us, right? And so there's such a connection between that customer journey and the marketing that a customer does to actually recruit those customers, their clients, right? Some of the things that I see going on out there today. So I'm, obviously you can't address what's going on out there today without saying AI, right? But I don't think that I don't think it's all encompassing, meaning that's not the only part of the experience. But I do think that what we're going to see is the advancement of that AI agent, where, for example, this year in 2025, there's so many options now. I mean, heck, we can have our own little AI assistant as workers in a company, right? But there's a lot of advancements where companies are able to put together a very human-like experience to deal with the initial engagement with their customer. And there's a much higher level of comfort in the consumer world to actually use those tools. And so, I just really think we're going to see a lot happening to complement and extend what our agents are doing. But I still think it's the same story. We're not going to get 100% of our inquiries solved by that AI, right? And I also think the other big play that we're seeing is understanding that experience, right? Understanding what the customers are doing, what's working, what's not, and quickly making changes. I actually see several companies out there recognizing that they've got, with the advent of cloud, look, we all do it, right? We have 5 different apps that we've signed up for. We don't know what we're paying in monthly subscriptions. I actually see companies, and it's almost the great app consolidation, I'll call it, right? I see companies going out there and really assessing, what have I invested in? And one of the places that they're looking, and it's another element of getting rid of some of the silos, but it's about that month over month cost and consolidating what they're doing. And it gives them a real opportunity to optimize the experience and the tools that are delivering it, which in the long run creates a more cohesive experience for the customer when they're communicating with them.
I think you talked about consumer comfort as well, and if I think back to the pandemic, one of the things it did was make people more comfortable with video. We're doing this on Zoom right now. Everyone, when your grandparents can go on a Zoom, suddenly it's very accessible. Everyone can do that, and I think with AI, we've seen that in consumer place with Siri and with other applications, and they're all going to light up on my desktop now that I've started mentioning them. But we've become used to them in our day-to-day lives, which means actually if they're well designed in the corporate world and part of customer experience, then we will accept working with that if it works for us, if we can transact and do what we need to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on, right? If it works, right? And this is something that, I mean, if you hearken back to the early days of IVR, right, where it was the first voice response systems, one of the things that as businesses, we'd go in and we'd say, okay, well, we just need to, tell them to press 1 to do this, press 2 to do that, press 3 to do that, right? And we did not make it a good experience. And nor did we ever go back and revisit that experience to see if it needed to change based on how our businesses were changing, right? Same thing applies here. If it doesn't work, I'm not going to use it, right? And I don't think I'm that much different than the rest of the population that is not going to stand for working with an AI agent or a system or whatever it is that doesn't make it easy for them to communicate on their end, that doesn't understand what they're saying, right? And even if it doesn't, then go ahead and get them to the actual person, right? And as businesses, we need to continue to refine that experience, especially with the speed at which technology is developing today, right? And so
I guess,
I'm just a believer that it's always, nothing's changed there.
and
Yeah,
I guess as well, the human agent as well. If the human can't solve it, then they're also still no good. It's just there's a human instead of AI there. You still find yourself escalating up and up through different channels potentially if the human can't help you.
And it still should be the tools and the empowerment that we're giving that human, right? If we don't give them the tools and the authority that they need, the autonomy that they need to help the customer to the degree that they know it's a merited question, right? They're not being swindled or something like that, right? But to the degree that it's the right thing to do for the business and the customer, we need to empower those humans that people are actually ultimately getting to do the right thing, to do the right job, right? And I think that's a key piece still to any experience today.
I think that's quite a fundamental and probably a good point for us to also go to a short break. So we'll pop our listeners on pause. We'll pop them on hold actually, and they'll listen to some delightful hold music, and then we'll come back and let's hear a bit more about one of your favorite customer experiences. So we'll be back in just a short break.
Your call is important to us. Please hold and you'll be connected to your next favorite customer experience shortly.
Welcome back to my favorite customer experience. I'm here with Laura Bassett from Techfluency today. And Laura, can I dive into one of your favorite customer experiences? So why don't you tell us about the customer experience?
Yeah. The one that really comes to mind for me, we do everything through apps now, right? We have our card in the app. We can load that card. We can go through the drive-through. Well, in this particular situation, and I'm not going to mention the company, but there was fraud where somehow someone had gotten in my account and was buying through this business in New Jersey when I'm clearly not in New Jersey. I'm in Florida. To me, it was clear, right? But the company's going to have to dissect that. Well, where I started was in the app to say, I have an issue, and then it was, can you chat? What I really appreciated, and this gets back to, I think, the core of the customer experience today, use the tools that are the most effective tools to get the job done. This was a complex matter, right? And so they were able to quickly get me to a human that could understand and consume what I was actually trying to communicate to them, that there was fraud and it wasn't me. I'm currently in Florida. They just spent $16, and I can see now that they had also spent the same, almost the same amount the day before, right? And the point is, I need to at least lock down the account, right? Well, to make a long story short, they did a great job of getting me through to a human, and that was when the experience actually started to fall apart, because the human was not empowered to do what was needed. They started to tell me that, okay, they're going to issue a ticket. They don't know how to close down the card, this, that, and the other thing. It took me a few times. Ultimately, he did say, you know what, I'm not able to help you. And this is actually what I appreciated. I felt for him to be put in that situation because I'm in the industry. I like to think that I have a little bit more patience than the next person. But what he did right is he said, you know what, I need help. And he went and he got another person, and I could actually hear the both of them. She coached him through what he needed to do. She was not his manager. She was a peer that had been at the company a little bit longer. They were able to basically keep me on the phone for a little bit, explained what they were going to do. They were going to issue a new card. They were going to refund the amount that was charged that was not my own. But they were going to need to call me back and kind of review. They needed to review some charges over time, right? And so then I was like, okay, I'm a little bit nervous. I'm gonna hang up with you, and this is actually going to get done. darn if they didn't call me back about 10 minutes later. And not only did they have it done, they had tracked back to the time that I told them. They had changed my card number, associated it with my current account, had a credit in there for the amount that was the fraudulent spend. And they personally called me back to let me know, have me log into my account and verify that I could see everything. So they did not keep me on the phone, but they continued to solve my problem. And then they could have just sent me an email, said, log in, let me know if everything's okay. But they called me back because that was the source of which we'd had a live conversation. And they could tell that I was a little bit concerned that someone was spending my money, right? That was what really took it over the top for me. I did not have to continue to sit on the phone for the 20 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it was that they did that. I was off doing something else with my kids, and I was not having to be distracted from that family time in order to solve this problem. And I just thought that really took it over the top, that they cared enough to get it solved, but they didn't lose it in the shuffle as soon as I hung up the phone with them. Because that, I think, is our great fear, is I need to stay on the phone with you to make sure you get this done. Right. And they did. They came back to me, and they actually had it resolved, and they circled back with an in-person touch.
And that's really impressive as well, given that the initial triage was good, and then it dipped, and the first agent couldn't necessarily get things done, but also put the ego to one side and went, actually, I do need help here. I'm going to bring someone in, and that person that they brought in got it done, walked you through the process, and then that point of nervousness of, oh, all right, leave it with us. And if you don't trust that company, or if we've been in the industry a while, that doesn't necessarily mean leave it with me, I'm going to deal with it now. It just means into a black hole because the next call coming through. But for you to get it all resolved within the same hour, or within 10 minutes even, is really impressive.
Well, and I will tell you what went on in the back of my mind is when they said they would get back to me, I was like, okay, this will be interesting, because I also like to, it's a little game that we play, right? Let's see if they actually can do this, right? If they actually follow through with it. So in my mind, I was like, yeah, this isn't going to happen. And I think that's what really took it over the top for me, is that they did come back, right? But like you said, it started to dip, but they didn't let that be the end all be all of the experience. So I think that particular agent deserves kudos too, for admitting that he needed help. But that's something they've done culturally, right? That's some time that they've spent to say, look, it's okay if you need help. Reach out, let your peer help you. We'll figure out a way to get the problem solved if you don't know. So
they've empowered people to feel vulnerable there, and to allow themselves to say, yeah, I need help, rather than just trying to carry on regardless and maybe fix or fudge something.
Right. Yep. And I think that's key, right? Culture, in more than just customer experience, but culture is everything, right? And they're going to not only benefit from the experience that those agents ultimately deliver, right? I left that a very happy customer. I'm still going to that business. Had they left me hanging and not refunded my money, I'd probably find a different establishment to go to, right? I can get coffee at other places. But they didn't. They came back, and not only that, that company is going to benefit from the agent retention as well, right? Now that guy feels good about what he did. He probably got a pat on the back internally, and they're going to retain the agents because they feel successful in their job, right? So ultimately there's more and more actual business impact that can come from having that right experience at every point of contact, whether it's digital, whether it's automated, whether it's with a human, right? So
even that experience as well, of not just handing it off to that person that could have helped, but being there and being coached through it, you're raising the tide for everyone at that point. So that first agent, he couldn't help you that first time. Next time something comes in, he can probably help that. Might not be 100%, but they'll get there 75% of the time. And that's a culture of learning as well as empowerment.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. And, initially I was like, okay, I'm listening to them solve the problem, right? Or her help him. And at first I was like, oh boy, this is going to take a minute, right? But he continued to communicate with me as well. And he's like, I'm sorry, I want to know how to do this. So, and because he was so straightforward of, I want to learn this, I had more patience for even just that initial part before they told me they would get back to me. You know, they would reach back out to me. I even had more patience during that initial process because he admitted that he wanted to figure it out and he wanted to understand how to help. Right. So when you know that they care, it changes the whole dynamic.
Especially when, I think as people that have been in this industry for some time, we have quite a high level of expectation because we know what good looks like.
Yes, I think we definitely. So one thing, we definitely have a higher level of expectation. And I think we know what good and bad looks like, just to clarify. One thing I've always done when I am working with companies is I will experience what it's like to do business with their company. It can be so telling of just, have they taken a step back to understand the journey, right? How are they even getting me in the door? Do I feel like a used car salesman is, coming after me? Or do I feel like this is a company that I want to do business with, right? And I just think that's so important. Even today, when I ask companies, have you experienced what it's like to do business with your company? It's less than 25% that have actually gone out and said, what is it that my customers experience? And I just find that in itself can be so helpful to understand even just the little things you can do to change the day-to-day for both your employees and your customers and prospects.
100%. Well, Laura, it sounds like it was from a stressful situation, one that was resolved and put you at peace, and made you feel good about that company. If people want to learn more about Techfluency and yourself, where can they find you?
Sure. So, well, I'm definitely out there on LinkedIn, Laura L. Bassett, but I also have a website, techfluency.biz. And so I would welcome, we can talk about marketing. We can talk about customer experience. I like I said, I think there's a great intersection point between the two. And I'd love to hear from people.
Awesome. Well, Laura, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you all for listening and tuning in. We'll see you next week on My Favorite Customer Experience.
Thank you for listening to My Favorite CX. Your listenership is important to us. On your keypad, please press the number between 1 and 5 to rank how much you've enjoyed your experience.